Good morning, everybody.
Morning.
Today we have a slideshow to go through with a lot of interesting information, and we also have some really interesting a piece of groundbreaking news for the game industry. It actually is kind of a big deal. It's very niche, but this is information that until today I don't believe has been publicly known, and I just found this out well, I inquired about it last week, and then I found it out for sure like an hour ago. So it is actually kind of a big deal. So if you stick around somewhere in this video, there will be a piece of really interesting information for all game developers. This week we're talking about, well, this is the weekly review of our development of Ultra Engine. It's currently in early access, both on Steam and on our website, ultraengine.com. And let's get into it. So this week we have a quote of the week. This is the first quote of the week we've ever had. It might be the last, I don't know, but I thought this was really funny. And the quote is, "You can make a charity simulator out of your game where everyone needs help. You give, and then you are left with nothing and you are devoured by wolves." That comes from our user Trashcan Useful. And when I took that text and I put it into Bing Image Generator, this is what it gave me. Charity simulator. I give goo. Everyone needs help and the love. And you goo more devoured by wolves. Then down here it says, "Give needs help." Quote of the week, everybody. Okay, so last week we had 16 bug reports resolved. Implemented, formalized the sRGB and linear color implementation. We actually had this in very early versions of the engine, and I kind of knew all this stuff before, but this time it just really clicked with me, and I understood it very intuitively. I wrote a very interesting blog about this because I think this stuff is not very well explained. If you watch any videos or articles about this, people start going off on gamma ramps and blah blah blah, and it's really not that complicated. And I'll explain it in a couple of slides actually. And I'm not sure about the order of this presentation because it kind of jumps all around, so just bear with me. The basic idea with sRGB is which of these curves. Okay, so look at this first curve. If you had to guess, if you didn't know, if you had to guess, where does it look like the midpoint between the black and pure white is? I would guess somewhere around a third of the way from the left, somewhere around here. And on the second curve, it looks like the midpoint is right around the middle. You probably know this already, but joke's on you because this curve, this gradient is actually linear. It's increasing by one value with each pixel. This gradient, it looks linear to our eye because we have greater perception of dark tones than we do of light, but this is actually the nonlinear curve. This is what they did here is they took the dark tones and they just stretch it out over the length of the gradient. That's the basic idea. And this is a common thing in photography. If you have a linear image, this is sort of what a camera sees. And this is what we want. This is what on the right is what we want to see, what our eye sees. And so the term crushing the black tones is a common thing in photography, and it's usually not a desirable thing. You usually want things to look like they do on the right here. And when we apply that to 3D graphics, the effect is pretty dramatic. Basically, I think of it in terms of if you're using linear color, then your base color or albedo or diffuse, whatever you want to call it, that's the brightest the surface can ever be, because if the albedo color is 0.5 gray, and the light that you apply to it is, let's say, let's just say it's 1.0. You multiply those two things together, and the result is 0.5. So like the brightest it can ever be is the original color, and it can only get darker from there. And that's why the colors look very, I don't know how to describe it, but on the left it doesn't look good. It's like very, the orange is very bold, but it looks like flat, sort of, and the dark tones are super, super dark, and you can't really see much detail in them. On the right here, the light can actually make the surface lighter without going over. You can also do that if you overdrive the lights past 1.0, but you can actually see the blue reflections of the PBR environment maps in the orange. You can see the gray tones a lot better. You can actually see the shadow a little bit here of this orange box, which you can't really see at all over here. So that's the effect that sRGB has. Basically, we start with assuming that your textures are all in sRGB color space, like this here, and then we run it through an equation that compresses it. It squeezes it back down to linear, and then we do our math in linear space, and then we unsqueeze it. We stretch it back out. That's the basic idea. And once I did that, immediately we started seeing an improvement in the screenshots. The color mixing here looks a lot better than what Klepto's previous images look like. Here's another nice example. You have brights that are not too bright, and then the dark tones are a lot more visible. They're not getting washed out. This was my own work. This is kind of one of the things that prompted it. Was I was having a lot of trouble getting more color out of the PBR reflections, and when I applied this technique to it, then you can see here the sort of pink reflection of the sky is having a very strong effect on the original color, and it's not just darkening it like we see here. It doesn't just make things darker. It can actually change the color and adds more color to it. So that has a very good effect. And this is all stuff that I knew before, but it's like I actually had more time now to pay attention to details like this. So bright colors will be about the same as before. They don't change very much. You can see the bright tones here are about the same, and it just brings out the dark tones. It allocates precision away from the light area, which we don't perceive as well, and it allocates it to the darker tones, so you don't get this on the left. And this also has a very positive effect on the environment cube maps. I took another pass at those and got them right. This is what they look like when you use linear color. And we were having a lot of problems in our example game trying to get the the scene like light enough without being too bright in some spots. And you can see here in the middle, the light is extremely bright, and then out here it looks very dark. It looks like the light's not really filling the room. With sRGB, with the sRGB conversion, it looks a lot more natural. It's not as overpowering in the middle. And out here, this is just about perfect. I mean, this looks like the way that light propagates. So very, very cool. I just want to warn you guys. I think that we actually probably need to store cube maps. So that's our HDRIs converted to cube maps. I think those actually need to be converted. They need to be stored in linear color space. So HDRIs, by default, they come in linear color space. And during that conversion process to a cube map, I was converting them to sRGB and then saving them in compressed BC6 format, which is a DDS compression format for HDR images. It's 3 channels with higher resolution than you would normally have in like 8 bits per channel. I think we need to redo those, and I think we have to store them in linear color space. And a problem that Andy actually pointed out might be related to it. So I just have to warn you guys. I didn't want to spring that on you before this weekend, but I think we do need to keep those in linear, because right now what we're doing is we get them in linear, and then we convert them to sRGB and save them in BC6 format. And then in the shader, they get converted back to linear, and then the final color gets converted back to sRGB. So I think that's probably not good. We should probably leave the cube maps in linear color space to begin with. I think that'll solve some problems. But that's enough about that. If you want, there's a very interesting blog post about this where I explain this in more detail, and I have some math examples. Next item, we have some enhancements to the editor. I talked about improved probe reflections. On Wednesday, everybody was telling me that the new HDRI to PBR converter tool wasn't working. And I was like, what do you mean? It works fine. I actually figured out by default, the tool was actually using OpenCL. And I have some NVIDIA compute SDKs installed on my computer, which is why it was working fine on my computer. So I switched that back over to the CPU, and it runs fine now. You can now... One small little change is if you have multiple objects selected like this, previously, you had to click inside, in the two viewports, you had to click inside one of the objects, and now it's just the entire bounding box is all good. And that kind of came about because we had the labels on the outside showing the dimensions, and then when we did that, it made sense to have a bounding box in dashed lines around the whole thing, and then being able to click inside that bounding box, that was just kind of a logical next step. So just little example of the evolution of the software. Some improvements to the toolbars. You might not notice this, but first of all, the 4 viewport view and the single viewport view are right next to each other. And actually, in my own build that hasn't gone out yet, I actually moved these 4 buttons. I actually moved these to be the leftmost thing. So these 2 buttons that you use all the time are going to be right here. And so it's just easier to access them, because I felt like previously it was 4, 3, 2, 1, and so I was going back and forth like this a lot. So that's one small little thing, and then just the way the toolbar stretches is a little bit different now. I'll show you what it does. When it gets to this point, where the new open and save buttons are getting squished, then the middle bar here, it stops, and then it doesn't go to the left until it needs to. And so the last 2 things, when the window is compressed, in other words, the last 2 things that you have are the new open and save buttons, and then the essential tools in the middle here. So small little details. And a big deal is the client authentication problem that was plaguing us for a long time. That has been permanently fixed. There is one situation where it could arise for a short period of time, but it's only happened once in like the last year, so I'm not too worried about it. But the big issue was fixed. It was basically some overactive security protocols. There was never any danger of the site being hacked through that method, but it was just the security was doing too good of a job without going into any more detail than that. I also took one day to work on whatever I wanted, and I decided what I wanted to do was create like a content browser for ambient CG's content. This is done entirely as a Lua extension. This was done in less than a day. And all it does at this point is it retrieves thumbnail, it browses like categories, and it retrieves thumbnails from ambientcg.com. And then if you click on one of these items, it just pulls up. This is my idea of like how to do a detail view. Instead of navigating to another page, just have like this thing pop up in the middle, and the interface goes dark. And then you'll have like the title here in big letters, have a big images, have a description, download buttons. And then if you click anywhere outside this box, then it just goes away. The only thing, I was able to do this whole thing with Lua, including the asynchronously loading thumbnails you see, which is pretty impressive, I think. The only thing that I couldn't do was I couldn't, like, if I had Lua resizing to events, window resize events, that's when you did see a pretty significant slowdown, and the interface got pretty choppy. But everything else Lua was able to handle very well. Now my idea here is, I think the next step, I think I actually want something like this built into the editor. I want like this. And I want to have another tab over here that says like library or something. And then when you click on it, this whole section here will be filled with folders. And then this whole area here will be filled with thumbnails. Like so. And so all the online content like this is just available one click away in the main interface. It's kind of like how we moved the flow graph editor. It's now built into the main interface, which I like this much better than having like a separate window. I want to do the same thing with this asset library idea, and the idea is to have one system in C++ that handles the user interface, and then to have multiple content providers, and each one is indicated by a Lua script, and that handles all the details of like fetching the list of items and fetching the links and stuff, and handling like whatever processing steps are needed when you install an HDRI or something. So we talked a bit about DLCs last week, and I want to make a distinction here between free and paid content, because the landscape is quite different now than it was a few years ago. There's a lot of high quality free content available now. We have access to tons and tons of very good quality PBR materials, HDRIs, which are like panoramas that you can use to turn into skyboxes, and some 3D models. It's kind of like you can easily find some stuff, and then some stuff is just it's never available for free. There's other content that I feel will probably be paid content for a very long time. Animated characters with like complete animations, those tend to be, you can't really find free stuff like that. Animated view models you can't find for free, not good ones. Anything that's scripted and like more like game ready type stuff, that's not going to be free. And then finally, like complete scenes, you don't tend to find that for free, and you can't really like the original scene in the image here that I'm working with. You can't really like make something like this by downloading a bunch of models and putting them together, because it won't look right. You really want to look for, when you're doing outdoor landscapes, you really want to look like for like a complete set of models that includes a sample scene, so that you can see how everything's put together. So that's the dichotomy today, and we kind of want to support both of those things. Let's talk about my past attempts at paid content. I've done this 3 ways. I've done this with Steam DLCs. I did this with Steam Workshop, and also we had something called the Leadworks Marketplace. The only one of these with good sales are Steam DLCs. The problem is I did like a revenue split with one author, and it's extremely tedious, like just sending out, calculating and sending out the payments and sending an email to the person month after month, year after year. I don't like doing that. It's like having to do your taxes every month. And then, of course, if you also have to, that does make your taxes more complicated as well. You have to have that person's social security number or tax ID in order to account for where that money is going. So I don't like that. Steam Workshop is sort of the worst of all worlds because the sales are very low through that system. The revenue split is automatic, so that's very good. Its content can be banned, but there's no like active system to approve it. So it very quickly fills up with garbage. And then finally, the user experience with Steam Workshop is terrible. It's just unreliable and slow. That could have been my implementation, but the way it's done is very strange. So that was a pretty bad experience. Leadworks Marketplace, that was going through our own forum system. And I'm open and interested in doing this in the future, but the sales are okay. Like, they're not nearly as high as the Steam DLCs, but they're higher than Steam Workshop. The revenue split is automated, so that's very cool. The basic problem is the sellers just are not motivated to fill it up with content, and so it's a struggle to get people to upload their models. So those are my experiences. So the lessons learned from this is that user-generated content systems are not that hard to build, even with the monetization, revenue splitting, and stuff. Like, the system itself is not that hard to do. It's just filling it up with content and getting people to participate is almost impossible because it requires like these two groups of people to both take action. And then I just sit back and I'm just sort of this useless middleman that collects a percentage, and it's just really difficult to do. At the same time, like, DLCs sell very well. My thinking is that it's easier to integrate existing ecosystems than to populate a new one with content, and that UGC should be front and center. So what I mean by that is when I said there should be a tab in the main editor, then that just shows the thumbnails of all the items from all the different content providers. That's what I mean. It's one click away. So the idea with the asset library is to build this into the core of the editor, like into the main window. And this will handle the asynchronous thumbnail display. It'll handle file downloads. It displays everything in a unified UI. Klepto actually had another browser like very similar to what I created, and his actually worked. Mine was mostly a concept, but same idea. Each provider can be added with a Lua script, and this fetches the web results and it handles the details of whatever conversion steps need to be done to, like, for example, to convert an HDRI into a set of cube maps. Here are some possible content providers: AmbientCG.com, Sketchfab.com has a ton of 3D models. Polyhaven.com is one possible one. And then last week, I was browsing around AmbientCG.com, and the developer there, in some blog that I can't find now, he was talking about his idea for a new API for something he's calling AssetFetch. And let's take a look at that. It's at assetfetch.org. And basically, he's designing an API for everybody to host it's like a general use API for, let's just see what it does. Listing assets, here's the response. This shows you, let's see, the URL to the asset. This is very interesting. This shows you optional parameters for the download. So you can have texture resolution. The default is set to 1024. Your choices are listed here. 1024, 2048, 4096. It lists the thumbnail, a URL for the thumbnail. So the C++ backend can asynchronously download this and display it like I showed you before. The title, description. So that's what he's working on. And I talked to him a little bit about it, and I pointed out, like, if you just, create a standard, you really need to get like people signed up in advance to use it, because if you just create the standard, nobody's going to use it. And he actually wrote me back a very thoughtful response explaining he is working with some other websites that don't currently have a web API, and they are interested in adopting this. So it seems like a pretty good thing to me, and especially since it sounds like he's definitely paying attention to the adoption before finishing the thing, which is very smart. So I think that's going to replace the AmbientCGs.com's current API, and I think it's going to make some other. It's going to be available for use with other websites that currently don't have a web API. Okay, are you ready to be shocked?
Sure.
Because this is shocking news that will cause the game industry to be reeling. So I asked last week on the Steam Workshop group, I said something like, hey, it'd be really great if we don't really want to deal with revenue splits. It would be very cool if a DLC could be provided from another account and Steam just pays them directly instead of us having to deal with, being the middleman. Even if we take a percentage of that, it's still really not worth it. And there is a way to do that. There's a link to the thread. You can only view that if you're a Steam developer, so you have to have access to the Steamworks group. What you do apparently is that you create the DLC, and then you can transfer ownership for your own app, and then you can transfer ownership of that DLC to another account, to the person who's intended to sell it. And then from there on out, the DLC will be listed under your app, but it will be controlled by their account. So they can set the sales, they can set where the payments go. And one person reportedly, I asked them if they've actually done that. That was there was advice, to them 2 years ago, hey, maybe this will work. And then there was no response after that in the thread. And I asked them yesterday, hey, did you do this? Did it actually work? And then just this morning they said, yeah, it did work, and we're doing it now. So this is kind of the best of all worlds, because DLC sales, that's the only place where money is made. That's the only way we found that where sales actually happen. And that's kind of the driving, if that's not happening, then nothing else matters. The revenue split is totally automated. We don't have to even see it. I don't even have to know how much money it's making. It never goes through me. The sellers are now very motivated because they've got full control of it. They're making a 70% cut on Steam. A thing that's kind of neutral is I don't make any money off of that, but that's not DLCs. I mean, at best, if I'm getting 70% of that and Steam is taking 30%, it's going to increase my total sales by maybe 30%. So it's not really the goal is more to add value to the software. That's how I want to make money, is off the software. So this is a very significant piece of information that hasn't really been known publicly until today, now in this video. So you should be shocked and reeling. Okay, so the road to 1.0, what have we got left to do? It's getting to be, there's few enough things and they're small enough that I need to start listing things again. I was kind of just saying yeah, there's a bunch of enhancements in the editor that we're going to do. Now I'm getting back to where I'm listing every little thing. Decals, particles, the asset library idea that I talked about, I'd like to add that in. I don't think it'll take more than a couple of days. I want to refactor the texture editor because it doesn't handle large resolution textures very well. It's using GDI Plus to display the images. And the problem with that is it has to convert, especially with compressed textures. It has to convert them into RGBA or BGRA, and then create a GDI Plus image. And it's a pretty slow step. Like, it takes a couple of seconds to open like a 4096 by 4096 image, and then it's displaying it with 3D graphics. It's displaying it with GDI Plus. I want to refactor that so it's using 3D context to display the texture. So then it'll just load like instantly. We need to add some customizable effects for the post-processing effects. Ocean water. I want to replace the CPU calling thread with a compute shader. I need to finalize and document the editor API for writing extensions. A couple of DLCs I want to do, and then the example game that we are working on. Questions?
Yeah, all good. Would there be an option to like disable the online library browser in case you want everything to be done in-house, let's say? I mean, I don't really care either way, because I think what most people are going to do is download the base PBR texture and then just take that and then be like, okay, this is a base, and then edit it so it fits their needs. So
I think 95% of people will use it as it is.
And also,
but
yeah, and
so
also,
can I answer that question first?
Yeah. Okay.
You can disable it by like deleting the scripts that have the content provider thing. Maybe we can do an option in the options to not do it. And I was also thinking about for security, we might want some kind of permission. We might even want admin permissions before the application does any kind of a web request. So in other words, I don't know the answer to that exact answer yet, but it's something that I have considered.
Right. And also we talked about because I was also playing with the editor last week, and I was running into some weird issues because I was trying to figure out a PBR work style that actually works for me. And there was a tool called Materialize, which is good for wall materials and such, but it does a smoothness map instead of a roughness map.
Mm-hmm.
And it allows you to pre-pack the materials, the mask in each material. And I was hoping that maybe there should be a tool that allows me to do that for an Ultra Engine. I shouldn't I don't want to use Materialize to do that. I kind of want to use Ultra Engine so I know what it looks like in the engine and have it generate a material map or a roughness map.
There's a couple of ways you can do that. One is to just take whatever their channel layout is, and you can have an extension that says import Materialize file. Right. Another way to do it would be to have a window that opens up, and then you have a window here, and then you have a panel that says base texture, normal texture, roughness, smoothness, metallic, and then each one has a button below that's select texture, and then you select the texture, and maybe you can
import PBR mask or whatever, and because right now it automatically does it, and I've been running into some issues with that. Sometimes it just gets confused and combines the wrong textures together.
Yeah. That might be a good way, and then you press save and it'll combine the channels in the way that you have laid out. That's one way to do it.
And And maybe it's like if you want it to be metal, but you don't want a metal mask, you just set that to 1 or whatever, or you say all metal or
Yeah, I think I'm more likely to do that as an extension because then like I can
Mhm.
just like show you guys how to get like an implementation of that idea working and then you can customize it to your heart's content.
Right. But yeah, and I also don't like it automatically generating normal maps because 9 times out of 10, I know what my normal map's going to look like, or I don't want a normal map. So
Yeah, I've actually experienced that as well.
so I guess there should be like two options, like auto generate, um, like PBR mask, and then auto generate normal map, and then let the end user like figure out, um, because now if you have this tool, you would just it just does it will just automatically do it, so they don't have to. So everything automatic can be for the web importer. So if someone's manually importing textures, they probably have want more control over how that material goes in
Yeah.
without.
Yeah. With this stuff, it tends to be laid out in a predictable. They usually use consistent naming schemes for the textures, so it is quite a lot easier to convert this stuff into a ready to use
Right.
material. But yeah, I do think that would be very useful.
Yeah. And also something that was bother me is when are you going to replace like the when you load like a bunch of models. I was loading like old models and had only had the FBX on them. So in the scene browser, it just said like static mesh, and I can't like rename it. I like consistency because some words said static mesh, others had like the name of the model. And you said you were thinking about having all the models just have the name of the file without this extension.
Yeah, do you think that should be during the conversion from FBX to?
I
Yeah, I
don't
guess that
know.
that should probably be when it gets dragged into the scene.
Yeah, so instead of like static mesh, static mesh, static mesh, it's just
Yeah,
the name of the model, and
yeah, I can't
because that
really.
that's actually more useful. Like,
I
I mean,
can't
the
think
end
of any
user,
reason not to do that.
yeah,
Yeah, static mesh or skin
or
mesh,
yeah,
and in
you
this
could
case, we
change
would
it.
just
You name that player.
that would be better.
Yeah,
Also, a good idea would be an option to downscale textures. So if you download a model from Sketchfab or something else, and you get 4K textures for something like a share or something, that you can
Very
downscale the
often.
textures.
Let's see. Very often they will these websites will have that. Very often they already have like the different options that you can choose from, and you can see here um, in this API in the AssetFetch API, it has those options available. But yeah, I mean an extra tool in the editor, anyways, to resample textures would be nice.
what about AI upscaling?
I don't know any good way to do that.
Oh, okay.
Like there are some things that will run locally on your computer, but it excuse me
Depends.
it requires like a huge like install of like Python and a bunch of junk.
Yeah,
Right.
I also think there are some good algorithms where you can upsample textures up to 4 times.
Well, if you can send those to me, I will certainly consider them. And it's also like I mean, you guys don't really have to wait for me to implement them. That can all be done as extensions.
Speaking of it, I guess that comes near the end because we've been asking for like documentation on the extensions and like how to do like basic things like how to like get the name of the project or like that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's best to just like ask me, like look through the existing extensions, and then if there's something that you want to do, like ask me on a case by case basis. And
Mhm.
I'm just sort of letting the usage, how it's actually getting used, decide how it's, where I'm going to focus on it.
Right.
Because it's hard to design something when I don't know like all the different ways it's going to be used. So I think just using it is the best way, and trying to do things and finding out like what we need is the best way to do it. Matthias K asks, for version 1.0, will there be paths and roads for the terrain? I'm not counting on that in 1.0, but in 1.1, that's actually something I'm very strongly considering. I have some things I want to add in like 1.1, and that's one of them.
Well, if you're gonna have like a spline system in, that will also be good for like ropes and such too. Because right now you have to model the wires, and it's really annoying.
Yeah.
Also
Let's
in
see.
upscaling, it's called XPR upscale. It's an XPR or something. It's the method.
Huh. XPR scale.
And this is a tool, but this tool uses the algorithm to upscale.
So it's algorithm. It's not a neural net.
Yeah, it's an algorithm.
Do we have any Do they show any examples of like images?
I know that Affinity Photo is using this XPR upscaling technique to upscale images.
Nearest neighbor interpolation. Oh, okay. Do you think this is more for vector graphics or?
Oh, it's for normal pixel graphics. Because for vectors you don't need really an upscaling algorithm.
I said that's. I mean, not vector graphics, but like this has very, very distinct lines that are very clearly identifiable. I wonder. It would be interesting to see what how this works with like with a photo. Very cool though. I will definitely investigate this more. Thank you. Oh, that's a nice example. It looks like it's finding lines. Okay.
Also, something you probably need to look into before the 1.0 release is packaging of games.
Oh
And
yeah.
since the engine can't no longer create zip files, what is your solution for that?
Either allow the engine to create zip files, or tar is now comes standard on Windows. Like every copy of Windows 10 and 11 includes tar, and that's also on Linux and Mac all the time. So
Right.
that's another way to do it.
Well, the issue is that like how I package my game is that I use 7-zip, and it'll allow you to like specify what files to actually package very like easily. Like you didn't have to like do any for loops. You just tell it like, okay, you like kind of like a git ignore. You just like hit a star and it's like I want these files and everything in this folder. And
Yeah, the way like no matter how the actual like the zip file is made, like the way I see this working out is you have a script that that says like include these extensions, and then probably like scans all the scenes and then finds the it basically does the same thing Leadworks does, but I would like to do it in a script so that the end user can modify it if they want to.
right,
So
because that your auto detection was actually like, I mean, it'll probably be better now because you can actually read the map file as a JSON file, but there was a lot of issues with people like did the automatic packaging and half the game was missing because it was referenced because the packager didn't like know it existed or something?
It was very it tended to side on error on the side of caution, and it would include things that it actually, the only way it could not include a file was if that string did not exist anywhere in the source code or in the scene files. Like what it would actually do is it would open up the scene and read all the strings, and then it would open up the source files, and it would scan the source files for any strings that occur. And if that same file name was in the project, then it would include it, no matter where it was. So the only way you could make something not get included is if you were like programmatically like creating, or if you were like loading a directory and then loading all the files in it. Like there was no way for it to know it. So the way you could overcome that was just to put a comment in your code somewhere in any file, and just have the name of that string of that file anywhere in the comment, and then it would work. But that's really the only way you would not get a file included. Will Ultra have AMD FSR support? Yeah, I think so. I don't think it'll take that long to implement that, and I know there's an implementation for OpenGL available right now. To be clear, like FSR is temporal anti-aliasing, and I do think it's a good technique because it specifically targets the pipeline shader, which the pipeline the pixel pipeline, which does tend to form bottlenecks, especially with a lot of post-processing effects. So I think that is a very, very good. That will be a very good addition to the engine. I think we'll get a major speed up under some situations with that technique, and then I think we will still get a major boost in performance under some circumstances when the culling all moves over to to a compute shader. Not because of the culling itself, because it's already done asynchronously, but because it will eliminate some processing and a lot of data upload that happens in the rendering thread. Most stuff I don't know if it'll affect everything, but in some specific scenarios it will have a big impact.
We also would need some, at least in the engine, some setting to set up the gamma value. We was writing in Discord about it.
Yeah,
because as I said, in sRGB on some screens it looks very different to another screen, so every user can have another image from the game in the end.
Yeah, I actually don't think I don't think the gamma that we're talking about here is the same gamma that you would see in like a game like Amnesia. All the frictional games do this, so like Amnesia and Soma, because this value has to do with how the lights and the colors are combined. I think what that actually probably references is your final output color. Well,
you need some. It's called gamma. Gamma correction, I think.
Well, I mean, what I'm saying is I agree with you. I need to like research it more and make sure that I'm doing the right thing before I jump in and start writing the implementation.
I faced with my 2D stuff a few weeks ago the issue. Maybe you can remind. I sent you a picture where the image is much brighter than another one in some cases. It was in the end something with the gamma correction. You need to implement that these values actually are working properly.
Is there a bug report for it?
I think it's not a bug. It's just
okay. Wait. Well, I mean, for anything like that, it's best to create a bug report, because I have so many people talking to me and I have so much information coming at me that, I mean, if somebody just says something in Discord, I don't remember it. There's no way for me to keep track of it.
Well, like, and it brings up a good point, because when I was playing with my scene, like yeah, it got rid of the crushed blacks, but then I now felt I needed ambient occlusion in my level, and that's now another post processing cost. And thankfully, I edited it and then just like minimized the effect, so it's just slightly there.
Hmm.
But but is that can that be like a part of a pre-compute process where you don't need space, um, screen space ambient occlusion? I just want like scene ambient occlusion because sometimes screen space can like make things look blurry or mess things. Like can not produce a clear image, or you can get artifacts.
Yeah, and if I can find the image, I was talking about this, I think last week.
Yeah, you brought it up a little bit where you can combine like.
Let me see if I can find the image. Got to go way back.
Yep. Well,
Like every week, it just feels like we're so much further ahead than the previous week. It's very fun. This whole process has been like really, really fun. And I really appreciate all the feedback you guys give me because, not everybody can count on, like having people who are actively hoping to improve the software and make it into. Anyways, let me see. I really want to find this image because it's very cool. It's a better example of what I'm probably the first person in the world actually to do this. And then it just became kind of a more or less standard technique later on.
it would be like from like the weekend-ish because
It was probably like Sunday or Monday. And this is all
weekends
sRGB. Okay. Okay, we're getting closer. I just don't want to go past it.
Yeah. I think you passed it.
Whoever gets there first gets the prize.
I thought you wanted forgot.
It's the shot of that Y wing in the forest.
Oh yeah, that.
Ah, there it is. Okay, so this is the GI, the global illumination component of light. Like this is a light map that just calculates the global illumination without the direct lighting component.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing about GI is it can be very low resolution. This is very low res. You can see, the pixels are pretty well blended, but you can see like that looks like a whole pixel right there. They're just it's very low contrast and very low resolution. So it's not that expensive and then when you combine it with the direct lighting, you get this. And this is the idea that I was showing another example of last week, but this is just a very nice example. This is the very high resolution shadow maps, which this would be pretty difficult to do with a large scene because that is some very high resolution textures there. And then you have the very low resolution baked GI. Yeah, I would like to have something like this. I don't plan on this in 1.0, but I probably more or less invented this technique, or at least I was the first person to use it in a real-time commercial application. So yeah, this is definitely something I want to do in the future. I'm actually like more interested in something like this than I am with ray tracing, because this is just zero cost. Like in terms of performance, it seems It seems very, very practical.
Yeah, and actually now I feel like I actually now definitely need it because now my crushed blacks are gone, and my scene actually like looks a lot more flat. You know what I mean? Like it looks like there was just like film over the scene.
Yes, it is Star Wars Battlefront. I think what you will find is you may need to see. Okay, so previously, like you tuned your scenes.
Yeah.
To
like I knew.
you tuned your scenes with that specific lighting in mind, and you got a certain result.
Mm-hmm.
And so like with Leadworks, for example, like I used to use very, very bright overdriven oranges, and then to prevent the blacks from like getting completely bleached out, like I had to just a second. I had to apply like some pretty like strong blue ambient light to bring these light levels up. With the sRGB to linear and back conversion, that's not really necessary. So I think overall, like once you have your colors tuned for sRGB, I think you're going to get a better result. And in fact, GLTF, right in the GLTF specification, it specifically says that the base textures are considered already to be in sRGB color space. I think any PBR textures you download nowadays are going to be the same. If you're working in Adobe Photoshop, I'm not sure, but I believe it's often probably the default that you're working with sRGB color space. So everything is already sort of tuned for this, and it will produce much better result just because the colors mix so much better than before. Other questions?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
About the DLCs, did you already have a plan when you will release the forest stuff?
Probably with the release of 0.96, which is probably going to be, I would say, like probably June 24th. Maybe they'll be available before then, but that's kind of my date. I think that I'm planning on.
Yeah, just to highlight, yeah, it seems that if you open, even with GIMP, I think it's sRGB is by default. So if you've been making textures by default, they should be ready to go too.
Yeah. By the way, if you're enjoying this video at home, make sure to smash that like button and subscribe so you never lose another video again. I feel sleazy just saying those words. But seriously, press the like button and then we'll compare. We'll compare the results next week and see if it makes any difference if I stop the video and tell you to smash that like button. This is for I know this is live for people who are watching the video afterwards. Press it twice. Wait, no, that'll cancel it out probably. Just press it once, or an odd number of times. This is the devlog channel. Okay, so, one other thing, one other kind of spammy thing. I forgot to mention this at the beginning of the video. I know a lot of people here have already left their review on Steam, but those really do help. So if you haven't, or if you're watching this video and you haven't, if you like the direction things are going in, then your review on Steam is very much appreciated. Any other questions?
VR. Like, this is like more of a. I don't know how to report this as a bug because everything's just broken. Would that be fixed?
Yeah, apparently that happened recently in 096, and I will certainly look at it.
Yeah, I don't know if that was because of the sRGB stuff and the shader stuff.
Probably something else that I did with like the way that things are rendered with render to texture works. Some little detail. It'll be easy to fix.
Yeah, because I've been looking into that. Because it's kind of weird that you built an engine for VR, but no one wants to do VR stuff. So I'm gonna.
Well, it's like, I mean, I think most people need to get like comfortable with the 3D before they switch over to the VR. Even though sometimes in some ways VR is easier.
And sometimes it's hard because you have to like get up every time and to
Yeah.
test something.
Well, if you're if
Yeah,
you're if you're an athletic man, then it is not a problem to get up out of your chair.
I think it's also pretty expensive, VR development.
Yeah, but I mean, you buy the headset once, and then I think VR is great because I'm very interested in doing games in VR because indie developers don't understand the concept of like a niche market. Like they look at it and they say, oh well, there's not so many VR players. I'm gonna go where most of the players are. But so they release a 3D game on Steam where they're competing directly with EA. VR is great because it's small enough that EA is not going to crush you out. There's people. I mean, there's stuff on there that is very popular, and the players are like starving for content. They're happy to pay money for it because they're not. These are people who can afford $1,000 for a headset for the most part. So I think VR makes a lot of very good sense. Like get something popular on VR first, and then once it's popular, then take it over to the broader market. I think that makes a lot more sense than just throwing something against the wall, just shouting into the wind, releasing a 3D game on Steam. Made an HTC Vive for devs.
I can only speak for myself, but I enjoy creating games for PC more than VR.
Yeah.
Well, VR has its own ups and downs. Like with the X1 project, you don't have to. We have to worry about a view model, and in VR, you don't. You just attach the gun to the controller, and you're all set.
Yeah.
The only thing is that you want things to be much more higher poly than they were than a flat screen. And I know that you, Josh, was talking about like concerns about some of our models. Like you were like, "Oh, this is too high poly," but in VR you can see everything much more clearly. So I guess you would just use the LOD system to balance that out and just reduce and make sure like if it's like in your face, it's the highest possible it can be, and then if you take 2 steps away, it shifts. Or what's your recommendations for that?
Yeah, probably just having like having a an additional like higher resolution LOD that kicks in at a closer level.
Right, but it can only support 3 LODs, so
4.
the 3 LODs, 4. So
Well, the base plus the reason for that is because I'm planning to because of the GPU culling. It makes things very. The data layout has to be extremely well defined. 4 seems to be a good number. If we need more, then we can do that. But right now, I'm planning on 4 because that's what I used for the mesh layer system.
right.
Do we have any other? Sorry, go ahead.
I wanted to ask about something. Is it possible to use any upscaler like DLSS or FSR for the VR application? I just didn't see any application which you use in the real life.
In VR specifically?
Yeah, because
I don't see.
we have very high resolutions per one eyes, and with base devices, the versus is very poor, very poor.
Yeah, you're totally right. I think FSR would actually be a very good technique for VR. I can't think of any reason it wouldn't work. It seems like it would work fine. I have not implemented it yet, but I do have like a copy of it that will work with our engine. I think it'll only take me a couple of days to add it in. So, yeah, I'm planning on it.
Okay, thank.
Yeah, so somebody already did it in a program called VR Chat.
That should help get the frame rates up too, also.
In some situations, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, additional questions, announcements, hopes, dreams?
Um, nothing this week from me, but maybe in the future.
Okay. Well, we look forward to that. If that's it for now, then I'm gonna switch off the video and a couple. We can stick around and have some off-camera chat as well.
I think, I'm not sure if it's possible, but that you, the vegetation, that if you paint, for example, grass and there is a brush, like in Cube, that you actually, don't have grass at this point. But I'm not sure if it's possible to make something like this.
I think we talked about this a couple weeks ago, and I said like I kind of agreed like in general like yeah it's a good idea. I can't say exactly like there's other stuff that I want to do first, but yeah that seems like a pretty reasonable thing, and I'm willing to see what that would take in the future. So bye YouTube. All right, we'll shut down the video now. Thank you everyone for coming.